I think there's a grief that happens in any change, but especially when you make a big change like getting sober. And if we just work over that, we can avoid it for a while, but then we never actually deal with, right? Like that won't get us where we want to go either. Like it can help and we feel better for a while, but there will never be enough success that will help us avoid the pain of being human.
What's up, everybody? Thank you for tapping into some Untapped Keg, our podcast about sobriety and mental health, part of the Believe Podcast Network. I'm RJ Zimmerman, and I have the honor to be here with Amanda White. Amanda White is a licensed therapist and the creator of the popular Instagram account Therapy for Women. She is the founder and director of the group therapy practice Therapy for Women Center based in Philadelphia, where she serves clients across the country. People are drawn to Amanda's unique expertise, accessible approach to healing and mental health, and her expertise has been featured in notable publications such as Forbes, Washington Post, Shape, Women's Health Magazine, and more. Amanda's debut book, Not Drinking Tonight, A Guide to Creating a Sober Life You Love, debuted on January 4th, of this year. It's an honest discussion of mental health where Amanda explores our reasons for drinking alcohol and the benefits of taking a break. For more information, please visit www.amandawhite.com. Amanda, thank you for being here. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
We're very excited about this. So I told you before we started that I read the book and I loved it. I cannot wait to get into this discussion. But before we do, let's hear from our sponsors. Today's episode of Untapped Keg is brought to you by Sober Athletic Wear. Alcohol, drugs, food, sex, gambling, shopping, pornography, gaming, and even social media are self-medicating tools we use to escape life's traumas, depression, and anxieties. Sober Athletic Wear's mission is to destigmatize addiction, mental health, and the negative stigma surrounding the word sober. If you have a heart for people dealing with mental health and addiction, show your support by repping the Sober brand. Visit soberathleticwear.com and also watch a clip from our Untapped Keg podcast featuring Troy Colmer, founder of Sober Athletic Wear, as he shares his story of addiction and why he started sober. Remember, we are all getting sober from something. Now back to the show. So, Amanda, where did you come up with the desire to write the book?
Yeah, so I'm 7.5 years sober myself.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you. So I've been sober for a bit. I worked in drug and alcohol rehabs. I then started my own private practice, and it was a very interesting transition going from working in an inpatient facility to an outpatient practice, where I started to notice how many people were left out of the conversation in terms of recovery and sobriety and things like that. Like when you work in an inpatient facility, people come in, it's very clear they have an issue with addiction. But when you work with people outpatient, I really started noticing how many people were kind of left behind or left out of the conversation of being able to question their relationship with alcohol because they didn't identify as an alcoholic, or because maybe they didn't meet all the criteria for an alcohol or substance use disorder. So I wanted to create a book that was also written by a therapist, not just a memoir, that could kind of bridge the gap and meet people who maybe don't consider themselves an alcoholic, or also people who have been in recovery for a long time, and give them some tools that maybe they haven't explored before.
That's awesome. I love the perspective that you wrote the book from. Like, starting off in that introduction, and the conversation that you have with your mom is powerful. I think that a lot of people have been there, right? So your sober journey starting off, you realized that you needed to make a positive change in your life. What did that look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting because I was someone who had an eating disorder for a really long time. And I knew that my eating disorder was a problem. I knew that was something I wanted to get into recovery from. But alcohol seemed like, like with an eating disorder, I knew that normal people weren't engaging in an eating disorder the way I was. Mm-hmm. But with alcohol, it seemed like everyone else was drinking the way I was. So it was a really hard thing for me to reconcile because it felt like I deserved to drink. It felt like everyone else was drinking. Yes, there were things that I did that maybe other people didn't, or maybe my consequences sometimes were drinking were more extreme than other people's consequences. But I say often that my drinking was kind of like Russian roulette. Like a lot of the times where I drank, it was fine and nothing horrible happened. But those times where I did lose control, the consequences were severe. Like I would abandon people, out at a bar. The last time I drank, I got so drunk that I woke up the next morning to teach yoga at 6 a.m. and I was completely drunk when I taught yoga. And that for me was just such a wake-up call. I mean, I did obviously other things along the way, but that for me was such a wake-up call of I was post-college, I was in grad school trying to become a therapist, and yoga was the most important thing in my life. And I taught yoga totally drunk. And it was such a wake-up call of like, I don't have control over this and I see where this is going. And I just had a moment, and I'd had moments before, I'm clear that this wasn't even my worst drunk. It wasn't my bottom even, I would say. But I had a moment of being like, I see where this path is going and I don't want to have to, continue down this path anymore and see how bad this gets.
Absolutely. I'm somewhat similar. Like I had been kind of leading up to it. So like my last time getting drunk, I didn't have huge consequences. But like I had times of like micro sobriety. So I knew that I had an issue, and my issue was that every single time I drank all of it. Right. So going into it, like I knew that there was going to have to be a change made. And so not everybody hits that rock bottom, and you make that point that's important, or maybe it's not just rock bottom, but a change needs to be made. Something's not quite right. So I love how you say like awareness is the precursor to change. Mm-hmm. You get that awareness that a change needs to happen. How do you recommend trying to figure out what change is best for you? I mean, everybody's different. Yeah. Everybody has to find their own way, right? But there are ways to help one another or help people kind of take those first steps.
Yeah, I think to your point, it is different for everyone. And that was what was complicated about writing the book, or just in general, as a therapist, it's hard for me sometimes to just give advice because I can think of like 20 different people and what I would say to each person. But that's really why I wrote the book with a lot of questions. I think one of the best things to do in cultivating awareness is to think about what the costs and payoffs are to drinking or, whatever substance you're engaging in or thing you're doing. Because anytime we're engaging with something like that, there is some type of benefit we're getting. It's serving us in some way. It might not be serving us long term, but for a lot of us, we'll use a substance to, deal with our emotions, to avoid having to have hard conversations with people, in order to deal with our social anxiety or depression. So I recommend thinking about how is this substance or thing I'm doing serving me in some capacity? And then also thinking about what it's costing you, because that's where we have to honestly assess, are the payoffs worth the costs? Like, is using alcohol or a drug, for example, to, regulate your mental health or deal with your depression worth, I don't know, losing friendships, having, not succeeding where you would like to succeed,
getting a DUI,
like the other
losing your
thing,
license, right? Losing your job.
Exactly. Or like maybe it temporarily makes your mental health better, but long-term it doesn't, in the future. So that's, I think, a helpful place to start. And I also think if you can try to take a 30-day break, that's a really helpful way to start also, because sometimes we don't even realize all the places that we're using something until we take that away and we realize like, oh, I've been using this to deal with all these aspects of my life that I didn't even realize.
And that's eye-opening, right? To me. So me personally, like I didn't dig into, I was a psych major for a little while, changed to poli-sci, then dropped out of college, went to line school and became a blue collar worker, lineman. And part of that was like, I could not see myself working inside in a day job. I didn't have an imagination thinking of what a day job could be, I guess. But like, that was a lot of it. But just, I hated myself for so long, right? I was not a good friend to myself. And I felt like I deserved the consequences from drinking. Like, I thought I was a bad person. I thought I was just not good. And now I have two little boys who need a role model to look up to. I need to be a friend, because even though I'm going to show them or teach them, tell them, I need to also show them, because they're watching me. Everything I do, they're watching me, whether I want them to or not. And that's a lot of the reason that I went into recovery. And now, like, I've really ramped it up these past few months, like seeing my son, my oldest is 4, and he's getting to the point where he's asking me questions for things that I do. And I'm noticing that he's listening to my conversations with like my little brother, or like, and then repeating it. So you never know like the influence that you have over other people. So doing this, like being your own friend, which you go over in the book so well. One thing that you talked about at the start of this that I really, really love is you talked about your drinking, or what you do to kind of like fill your holes or your coping mechanism. I would say the past 5 to 6 years. So I'm married to a therapist. So, she's really explained a lot of things to me even before I stopped drinking. But like, the human psyche is such a spectrum. And now we know it's a spectrum, where we used to have the boxes that you would check, or the boxes you would put people into. And now we're understanding like gender is a spectrum. That honestly, everything that makes up a personality is a spectrum. You can't just put people in a box. And it's refreshing. And it's, and you point out, we look at everything else that's in a spectrum, but drinking. Drinking is a yes or a no. And is it problematic or is it not? And I love that term that you came up with. And I would like you to let everybody know what it is, because I think it showcases kind of what you're talking about a little bit more and can break it down for people.
Yeah. So in the book, I created a term called disordered drinking. And I think it's a powerful term because right now we still get stuck in, like you were saying, someone either is an alcoholic or not an alcoholic, or they have an alcohol use disorder, or they don't have an alcohol use disorder. And that really limits our ability to talk about it, because as a therapist, really, I can talk to clients about almost anything. We talk about their sleep habits and how those are serving them. We talk about their relationships and how those are serving them. But when it comes to alcohol, there is this huge wall that often happens where people say, when you ask them like, how much are you drinking? Or how has that been? they will say, well, I'm not an alcoholic. And there's this very defensive.
And it's like the first thing that they say too, right?
It is. It's the first thing. And it's crazy how much that just cuts the conversation off because we have this idea that if you don't drink, the only reason you don't drink is because you're an alcoholic. And people are either born alcoholic or not. So if you're not an alcoholic, you should drink. And there's something wrong with you if you're not. So that also creates all this stigma where people don't want to say they're not drinking or explore that relationship with alcohol because it's like admitting that you have a problem or you have a disease or you're an alcoholic. So instead, if we can open it up into thinking about how we all do maladaptive and unhealthy coping behaviors during our lives. That doesn't mean we have a problem with them, right? Just because you fall into a negative pattern of not sleeping and staying up too late and scrolling or whatever, like that doesn't mean you're doomed and you will have insomnia for the rest of your life and you have like a sleep disorder and you need to identify yourself that way. So when we take away the labels, it just creates more space to explore it. And I think a lot of people can fall into unhealthy patterns of drinking. I mean, I think college is a really good example of almost everyone lots of people, I should say, binge drink in college. And it might not become anything. They may not develop any type of disorder over it. But if we could have that term where, like binge drinking is disordered drinking. It's like an unhealthy drinking behavior we can fall into that we can then talk about, but you don't have to label yourself as having a disorder.
And that's, I mean, like you said, that's important to starting a conversation, even with just ourselves, like the acceptance that, you know, you could be a better for yourself and for everybody else around you than you are. I mean, you know, we'd like to say that going sober is the most selfish decision that you can make because you have to make it for yourself. And if it doesn't start there, then you might be able to do it for a little while, but you're always going to fall back in that rut. And the same can
possibly
be said,
use something else, like addiction switch. Exactly. If you don't heal that under part,
absolutely, and
we'll find something else.
Exactly what I was going to say is, you know, as mental health is the same. Like, it just seeking therapy doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean that you know, we got to remove that stigma too, which we see athletes doing that. And we see athletes talk about being sober too. And I bring up the athletes because I feel like that's where a lot of social change starts, where conversations happen, and then it can go to it, like it filters out to everybody. And then if you start the conversation, that's a big part of it. And I love how you break that down so that it's a conversation starter. And then the question you ask, you know, what am I getting from the drinking? And what am I losing? But it doesn't have to be drinking. It could be anything. Right. I mean, being hard on yourself, it could make you be better. But then what are you losing? Like, do you feel like you deserve to be laying in bed all day, just not able to move? It's not something that you can flip a switch and it's fixed. And that's the top of mind and awareness that you talked about that really kind of was a little bit of a light switch for me too, that that's when change really begins. That's where it begins. This conversation is fascinating to me, and it's going to help so many people. Your book is, and like being able to reframe things for modern people as well. Like, you know, I got to see some of your Instagram posts and how you relate those to, you know, your sobriety and stuff, and making it's fun. Yeah.
Well, that's my whole goal is when I started my Instagram account, I was really clear that I didn't want to just make like a sobriety account or a recovery account. I mean, I think there's a couple reasons. I think one, as someone who's in recovery from multiple things, and I work with clients who are in recovery often or need to work on multiple things, we want to separate things into boxes again, right? We want to say like, this account is for like, alcohol-free people, and this account is for drug-free people, and this account is for eating disorder recovery or something like that. But for me, my brain works by I like to see all the overlaps of things. And to me, it's like the root of all of this stuff is really the same. And I wanted to be able to talk about mental health and not have to be limited to just talking about sobriety, so that other people who maybe wouldn't follow a sober account can be more exposed to maybe their life would be better if they stopped drinking, or they drank less, or they took a break from drinking.
And that's something that we've kind of tried to bridge the gap too. So when we started, we wanted to share our stories so people knew they weren't alone. Because when I stopped drinking, I went cold turkey. And one of the things that helped me was I listened to a podcast by Chris Hardwick called The Nerdist, and he would interview celebrities and stuff. And he would talk about sometimes being sober, sometimes it was with the celebrity, sometimes it was about mental health and everything. And listening to it, I'm like, that is awesome. Like that, I'm not alone. Like somebody else has kind of felt the same way I was. And like, so that's the main reason we started the podcast. But we got kind of dragged down. I wouldn't say like I allowed people to tell me like they only believe like the struggles, or, they weren't like, if you're really happy, then, you don't provide much help or anything. It's like, why am I letting people tell me how to feel or how I should feel about my sobriety and recovery? Like, let's show people that it's fun. Like, I have more fun now than I did while I was drinking. And the reason is that I don't feel guilty about my actions.
Same. I mean, I think there is just such I wish I could shout from the rooftops how much you don't know how confident you will feel when you aren't reliant on a substance to have fun, to socialize, to do what you want to do. When you don't I used to struggle with change and shame so much because I would make all this progress in therapy and then I would go get drunk. And it was like, your conscious self leaves. Yeah. And you do things that you don't want to do, that you regret, that are out of character, out of alignment with your values. And I couldn't reconcile with half of my life was conscious and I was participating in it. And then when I would get drunk, it was like something else was taking over. And it caused so much fragmentation for me. And once I stopped drinking, being able to feel empowered and know no matter what, I'm not going, I can still make mistakes and do things I regret, but I don't ever have to wonder or not be in control of a situation ever again. And that is something that's helped my self-worth so much, because I used to be so afraid because I would act totally out of character when I got too drunk.
And nothing feels worse than waking up, not knowing exactly what you did the night before and thinking, who do I have to apologize to this time?
Yes. Oh my God.
It was just like, what am I doing? So You kind of touched on it a little bit, and not letting people, and I touched on it too, not letting people tell you how to do things. Like, one thing that I've been really vocal about, especially I would say the past couple months, is gatekeeping when it comes to sobriety. There's a lot of people out there who think that they are the gatekeepers. Yeah. And we call it a sobriety journey. You call it a sobriety journey. I think that that's the best message to put out there, that it is a journey, that there's no exact path to follow. There's, some outlines you can, and that's the big thing that we try to talk about too. There is no end point. Yeah. So when it comes to gatekeepers, how do you think we could best kind of get the message out there that it's your choice, do what works for you. Yeah. And, how can we get around them, I guess?
Yeah, it's such a good question. It's such a complicated question. I interact with it a lot on Instagram. If I share about multiple pathways to recovery or harm reduction, I often get people who, gatekeep essentially and say, this is dangerous. I think that's the most frustrating message, is that this is dangerous. This is harmful message. And I think what happens is people don't understand that, okay, maybe for you, let's use an example of drinking a mocktail, right? Or an alcohol-free beverage.
That's a great
Maybe
one.
For you, it's dangerous because it would make you want an alcoholic beverage. You feel like it would be a slippery slope. It scares you. But just because you're afraid of it or it doesn't work for you doesn't mean that it won't work for other people. And I think it's gotten, I think people forget that. As a therapist, I always think of tons of different points of view because that's how my work works. But, I think trying to remember, and maybe I think one of the best things to do is social media, is people talking about other things. I mean, I think one thing that really has shifted the conversation forward is other people coming out and saying, hey, I do this. Like, this works for me. This has worked for me, so that people can see other people that are doing well, that this path worked for them. Like, I think 12-step programs were the only option for so long that anything else became dangerous. And one thing that people don't know about, I went to a 12-step program. I think they're phenomenal for lots of people. And I think one thing that's hard is that 12-step programs were formed before addiction medicine was formed. So a lot of rehabs were formed out of 12-step programs, and it's kind of enmeshed, and there's no separation essentially between it because the 12-step program created the rehab and then they hired in the medical staff. So there's no separation between them. Yeah. So it's not always the most effective thing. It's just statistically what is most common, for example, in lots of rehabs, which is where a lot of times, people can start this journey. So I guess my long answer is being open, talking about it. I used to be afraid to talk about how I liked mocktails, and they're something that makes me happy, that I like, I feel like enhance my recovery because it helps me, feel more connected and feel like I can have something else to drink besides water.
And they're delicious.
Yeah, they are. And there's lots of literally completely zero alcohol-free beverages. Right. So, but yeah, I used to be afraid to share it because I was afraid of being judged. So I think the more people that can share what works for them can help too.
And that I love the non-alcoholic beverage. So my dad has been sober for, God, he's approaching 30 years. And I don't know the exact number. I don't even know if he knows the exact number, but he loves NA beer. Yeah. So he'll tell me about NA beers and stuff. And I liked the flavor of beer, but I didn't like the flavor of Miller Lite. I didn't like the flavor of Bud Light, right? Yeah. Those were my drinks to get drunk. And I tried NA beer twice, both times. They were obviously on the shelf for a long time. They were skunky. It was like, nah, I'll just have a soda instead. That's fine. So it didn't work for me, but my dad absolutely loves it. And it works for him. And that's in a family dynamic where things are different. They look different. And like you said, there is literally nothing wrong with that. And, one thing that I've noticed too, is that a lot of times these gatekeepers, they go after women. Yeah. I have talked a lot on Twitter and everything else. And I've honestly, and we're not that big, so that's also part of it. But also just people, they haven't come after us and said, no, that's wrong. Or, hey, you have to do it this way. Or we have had people in the comments be like, well, are you working the steps? What step have you done? 4th and 5th step? I don't know what that is. No, I'm trying to get better for myself, and my way of getting better, honestly, and you touch on this, through threw myself into work. I was a workaholic. And then I threw myself into a video game with my friends. Like we played every single night. Like I distracted myself.
Yeah.
Never took a look of what was going on inside. So I never, fixed anything when it came to stressful situations. I would pretty much just shut down. Didn't understand or know my emotions, which, that's another thing that I want to get into is, your emotions, because they come back, or they're always there. You're going to start noticing them, right?
Yeah.
So knowing all of this, and then these gatekeepers that come out there, one podcast that we love to promote is the Unashamed Alcoholic. And she is in AA and she talks about it. People come at her all the time. And I'm always like, I don't care. She didn't name names. She says that she's sharing her story.
Yeah.
Just leave it be. If you don't agree with it, fantastic. But you don't have to attack people. Or you could be like, well, I don't know if I'd be super public about the AA thing because people might be able to find people in your group. That's something different than going out and saying, you can't talk about this. How dare you? You're a bad person because of it. No, that's shaming people. Yeah. Let's not do that. Why can't people just be themselves, right? Why can't we just want to help people and share our experiences? Let's make the world a better place.
It is one of the biggest ironies, right? Because we know shame is something that's super connected to relapse and struggling with a substance use disorder. So it is wild how much people try to shame other people. And it's you're saying you're concerned about someone and shaming them, which is more likely to cause harm to them. You think you're helping them by being don't do this, or what's wrong with you? But you're really actually causing them more, making it more likely that they're going to be in pain and question their decision. And for me too, what I always think about is, okay, if someone is unable to think about or have enough awareness to understand that something they're doing isn't working for them, they're probably not going to be successful anyway. So you telling someone you shouldn't drink non-alcoholic beer or whatever, if they're going to relapse from non-alcoholic beer, or if that's going to be a problem for them, you telling them that is not going to be what helps them. Absolutely. They were already going to be dealing, they were going to already need to figure that out anyway.
And that's what a lot of this is. I mean, let's be honest. Oh, my baby, come here. Sorry.
No worries.
It's okay. Oh, it's okay. I know. It's okay.
So cute.
Thank you. It's okay. So, one thing that we know, but we grow up thinking, there is no instruction book to life, right? There is no manual. There is no template. Yep. And that's what a lot of this is trial and error. Yep. So how do we figure things out? How do we... Okay, come here. It's okay. So, how are you expecting other people to get better without letting them figure it out for themselves? Because that's what we're all doing.
Exactly. And we can't do that work for someone else. It's just impossible for us to do that work for someone else. And if we try to, we're going to probably cause more harm anyway.
Absolutely. So, it's okay, baby. I know. So, the trial and error.
Yeah.
Right? It's one thing that I would like to talk about with you being a therapist, and this is something that I've struggled with, and I didn't realize it till we had a guest on who said that it's something to work on and think about, is trying to find a therapist that works for you. Let's say you have a therapist, you're like, okay, I did the thing. Now it's not quite working. I just don't feel connected. How do you like, I guess, so when I really like the way that you explain it and like the relationship that you have with your clients in the book, which I know the clients are fictitious, but you can feel how it is. How would you describe a good, healthy therapy client relationship?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, the most important thing, and I'll preface this by saying the relationship you have with your therapist matters a lot. Statistically, based on research, we know that that is the most important factor that determines whether therapy will be successful, is how good of a relationship you have, how comfortable you are, and whether you can be honest. Because I think the role of a therapist is really to support you unconditionally, but also to kind of hold a mirror to you and show you the little spots where you say one thing, but you do another, or you say that you want to change this, but you struggle to take action. So I think a good therapeutic relationship is one where you can be honest with your therapist, where you feel comfortable with them, where they ask a lot of questions, they push you to kind of take action on that, but really where you can gain insight into yourself and what is the why behind what you're doing. They help that awareness.
And I think that when we talk about that, like that's something that we don't talk about, right? Like we talk about just make an appointment, go to therapy. Like we don't talk about the relationship with your therapist, and that's what it is a relationship. And if you just aren't connecting like you think you should, it's a good time to try a new one. And
totally.
Like I said, I didn't know that. I was just like, oh, I made the appointment. I have a therapist. They're talking to me. They're telling me emotional words and things I can do to kind of work through it and stuff. Like this is great, but there was no push or like dig deeper into things. Like I never talked about my past. Or like my deep past. Like I pretty much just talked about my right there and now, and that was kind of it. So, and that's what I needed was somebody to push me to think about things a little bit deeper. So,
yeah. I feel like a good therapist helps you look under every rock, right? Like leave no stone unturned in understanding why you do this. What, like sometimes people say like, I don't want to talk about my past. Like it's back there. It's not relevant. And yes, if you only spent sessions only talking about your past, I wouldn't recommend that either. But the goal of good therapy is to help you understand, you know, the context of why you drink, for example, what things in your life maybe have caused you to develop this belief, right? That then causes you to engage with this pattern of behavior. Because a lot of times if we don't ever look at our beliefs, we're just living unconsciously, carrying out things that we inherited from our families or our culture or society. And then there's no space for us to choose something different.
And I want to get into that. First, let's hear another word from our sponsors. So it's wintertime, seasons change. One thing that I notice is like my dry skin really starts to come in. So I have eczema like right above one of my eyes. Sometimes I get it a little bit over my other eye. I'm bald, as you can see. So like, I'm not used to taking care of my skin. I never was raised to put lotion on after every time you shower or put lotion on throughout the day. I just didn't do it. And it's still a little bit of a problem that I forget. Like I'm trying to do better. My skin looks much better. And one way you can help that is through OUAI. So quench your thirsty skin and leave it feeling satin smooth with OUAI Melrose Place Body Cream. Fast absorbing to nourish your skin when you need it the most. And it has hydration that lasts and prevents dryness. It has high quality nourishing ingredients like squalene, coconut oil, Pupua Sue butter. I always struggle on that one. And cocoa. You can go to theouai.com to experience the new OUAI Melrose Place Body Cream and Body Cleanser. Your body, your way. Go to theouai.com, pronounce the way, and use code BELIEVE, BLEAV, to get 15% off your entire purchase. That's 15% off your entire order at theouai.com and use the offer code BELIEVE. So, we were just talking about emotions and being kind of unconscious and bringing forth kind of things that you learned. And then I said earlier that I wanted to get into the emotions. So that's one thing that we don't prepare for, that we don't associate necessarily alcohol for. I think we do with like drugs and other things, but numbing yourself so you don't have to feel those emotions. You have an exercise in the book that is, I found myself doing it like 3 or 4 times already, with your body. Could you explain that to people? Because
yeah,
it's fantastic, and it's helped me name some emotions that I didn't know were there.
Yeah. So a lot of times people don't know how to process as an emotion or understand what emotion they're even feeling. And yeah, because a lot of us, right, I think about it, unless you were in therapy or your family was a therapist or you read a book, we're not taught this in school. So I have an acronym in my book that's NAILER is the acronym, and it will teach you exactly how to understand what you're feeling. So the N stands for notice, and it looks like noticing, because emotions start as physiological body sensations. So you might notice that your chest is tight, that your heart is beating fast, maybe your palms are sweaty, maybe, you are struggling to take a deep breath. So you want to notice, the first thing is just notice all of the different physiological body sensations that are going on. Mm-hmm. The next step is allow. You want to allow the emotion or those sensations to come up. A lot of times people, once they start to feel a tight chest or a sensation, they will judge that emotion. They'll say like, why am I feeling this way? I shouldn't feel this way. I need to distract myself. What's wrong with me? We will judge ourselves to stop ourselves from feeling how we're feeling, essentially.
I think that's really important.
And that's a really common thing.
Yeah, that's important for people to know, that it's okay to allow it, and it's better to.
Yes, exactly. And obviously, like, you might be in the middle of a meeting or be in the middle of doing something, and you might not be able to stop everything and do this in the moment, and that's okay. But eventually, these emotions need to be processed, or they're going to come out in an unhealthy way, essentially. And then the next step of it is investigate. So you want to kind of get curious about, right? Like, why might my heart rate be increased? Why is my chest tight? Does this feel like other sensations I felt before? And kind of get, right? You want to investigate from a curious place, not a judgmental place. Context of emotions really matter. So it's like thinking about, what did I do before this? What do I have coming up in the day? Why might I be feeling this way? Mm-hmm. And then you want to label the emotion. And it doesn't seem like, a lot of people don't understand how important it is to actually name the emotion that you're feeling. Mm-hmm. But the better, studies have shown that the better you can label and identify the exact emotion you're feeling, the better you're able to take care of yourself. And a really good way to understand this is, if you think about kids, and you'll probably relate to this, RJ, because I know you have young kids.
Yeah.
If they only know 3 emotion words, which a lot of them when they're young, right, know like mad, sad, and like happy.
Yep.
They're going to feel one of those emotions 1/3 of their life. But if they start to learn the word frustrated or annoyed or tired, right, or something else that's going on, it can reduce how they're feeling, because our understanding of the word also informs how we feel. So labeling your emotion is really important.
Name it to tame it.
Yes.
So yes. I can't take credit for that one. That was Jessica Leahy a couple episodes ago.
Yes. And I think like a helpful way sometimes to start too is to think about, because sometimes the idea of labeling an emotion is overwhelming. Mm-hmm. So I recommend thinking about, do you feel high or low energy? And do you feel like high, like, are you in a good or not good mood? And then you can kind of pick from there, right? If you're like high energy and in a bad mood, that's like anger. Where if you're like low energy and you're in a bad mood, it would be more like depressed. If you're high energy or you're low energy and, high mood, it could be like content. Mm-hmm. You're like pleasantly fine, but you don't have a lot of energy. Where like high energy, high mood is like excited.
Absolutely.
And then you can kind of start from those buckets and then start to get a little more deep into what that exact emotion might be. And then the final step is like explore and release. So it's just, that might look like journaling. A really important thing about emotions is their energy. So, right, they start as this physiological sensation in your body, and they don't, in terms of evolution, when we engaged in fight, flight, or freeze, there was something we did afterwards, right? Like if you get ready to fight because a lion is chasing you, you go run. And then that energy is expended, and then your body knows it's safe. Where now, right, I think about like we're in traffic and we're like we're ready to fight or flight, and there's nowhere for us to go. There's nothing for us to do. So it's important to get into the habit of trying to spend some time, like 20 minutes a day or 10 minutes a day, or at least a couple times a week, doing something to let that energy out, whether that's journaling, like processing what you're feeling by talking to someone, whether that's going for a walk or exercising in some capacity, so that you can process some of that energy and let it out.
That is like, first off, the way that you laid out, like your high energy, low energy, and then your, can't think of the words. I've
like the high and low mood.
Yes, high and low mood. Like that helps people like me who don't have, I struggle with the words, right?
Yeah.
But it's a place to start. And when you have a starting place, you can take steps. And, I've been working on top of mind. So I have ADHD that I got diagnosed with a couple years ago. And I finally, 2 weeks ago, switched to a new medication. I'm on Vyvanse now. And I was really worried about going to a stimulant because of my alcoholism. And I talked about that with my psychiatrist. And luckily I got a sober psychiatrist, so he totally understood where I was coming from and recommended this one. I have found words to emotions that I did not, I just wouldn't have been able to. Like there were just too many thoughts and things in my head. So for it to be orderly, like I bought 5 notebooks, and now I have 5 separate notebooks that I write things in, each for a different subject. And I love learning. I've always loved learning, but it's like the way that I can now organize and write things down and find words is like, it's been so eye-opening to me. But then having those, those starting points that you laid out, and knowing that you need to feel these emotions and get them out and find something that goes along the lines of something that we talk about too, is finding a hobby. When you go sober, or if you've been sober for a long time and you're, feel like you're struggling, you have time now. You used to be doing something that was taking your time, took so much time. Now you have all this time. What are you going to do? I mean, we've talked about picking up something that you kind of put down for a little while, seeing if you vibe with it, trying new things. I picked up cooking a few years ago, and now like I'm all in on it. And I love cooking. I love making these meals. I started with Blue Apron. That was my starting point. And now like I'm starting to branch out even more. I've cooked Indian food. I've cooked a lot of Asian food. Like it's become I'm actually right now in my Instant Pot, I made French toast bread pudding this morning that I'm going to eat after this. And I hope it turned out really well. So like, that's something that I've done. So like, if you're looking for an outlet, like you said, you're journaling, you're exercising, it's like, explore yourself and try to find that new hobby would be my advice.
Absolutely. I think a lot of us are creative and we don't identify with that or realize that. I really believe everyone is creative in some capacity. It doesn't need to look like being an artist, right? It could look like cooking. It could look like, I think it's creative if you like to hike and you learn about the different types of nature that you're in or different trails. And I think tapping in creativity is so nourishing and really helpful.
I think that's a really amazing point, and I really appreciate that. Like, the way that you approach things are so all-encompassing. Like you take these specific things and like it's relatable. Like the way that you're able to relate things, that's a skill and a talent, and like you have it, and it's fantastic. So, we're kind of winding down a little bit, but one thing you talk about in the book, and I want to get into real quick, and then I talked about it earlier, is like workaholism and how we get that passed down from our parents. But one way that I've started to look at it is it's really toxic work ethic. Like where you are, it's not necessarily just workaholism, but it's like the work ethic that we think we have to do because that's what we not just saw, but we're told that's what we have to do. Like you only have finite amount of time in a day.
Yep.
And if you're just going to put it into a job, and let's say it's a job that you don't enjoy, trying to make ends meet, like the way that our culture glorifies that is dangerous. And
yes,
what have you seen like in relation to maybe like a substance or falling down into a hole of some sort with like the culture and the toxic work ethic, as I call it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on with, I think it's like our culture. I think that we are taught, a lot of us, that our worth is tied to like our productivity. And a lot of times that can even span from thinking about, it's the first question, right? Often people ask when we're young. A lot of times our parents might praise us only for what we do necessarily. So it can become this way that we know to get love or attention. I think it's a really common thing sometimes, especially I think because when we stop drinking or engaging in a substance, we do have this time. We may feel like we were behind with something, right? Like maybe we start to realize we wasted so much time over the past couple years, or maybe we didn't like succeed in our career. So we can channel all of that energy now into like working and trying to be as, productive and kind of perfect as possible, as a way to avoid, right, that feeling of recognizing like, oh my God, I missed so much of my life, or I didn't realize how much time I spent doing that. And really, we can almost like work and be productive and produce to avoid dealing with those emotions and sadness. And I think there's a grief that happens in any change, but especially when you make a big change like getting sober. And if we just work over that, we can avoid it for a while, but then we never actually deal with, right? Like that won't get us where we want to go either. Like it can help and we feel better for a while, but there will never be enough success that will help us avoid the pain of being human.
And I think that's a really good point. So I've read so many books like the past 2 months that I haven't read before. Like I'm in this growth mindset that is, it's new to me, and like it feels so empowering. But one thing that they talk about in the books is we always put these points, right? Like if I just get my degree, everything will be better. And for me, this is true. Like if I just get my career, everything will be better. If I just do this certain thing, we always put these points on it. If I just get sober, everything will be better. Like we have to put the work in. Like there is really no endpoint. Like you said, with our sobriety, there's no endpoint. With life, sure, there's a little bit of an endpoint, but like it's not looming over the top of you. We don't know when. So really, we're just trying to be our best selves and grow. Like, get that growth. Understand that that's going to be more fulfilling to yourself than hitting this goal. I think one place that we put this on that I've kind of tried to is retirement, right? It's like we talk about retirement, we get to retirement. Why are we wasting our 20s and 30s thinking about what we're going to do in our 60s? Like, yeah, that's something that we need to change. And I think that, you know, millennials, younger, like the Gen Z and all that, like, I think it's starting to change a little bit with that. Yeah. And I'm very happy, but it makes me feel bad for the older people that that's what they look forward to. And a lot of them didn't get to experience it. And yeah, I mean, that's something to think about. Like, if you've never thought about it and you're working and you're like, well, when I retire, I'll be able to travel. When I retire, you don't know if, you know, your body's going to hold up. You don't know if something you did like when you're 15, 16 and you hurt your knee, and then all of a sudden you're 30, 40 and now you need a knee replacement and you can't walk like you used to. I mean, that's things that happen that we don't think about. And like, that's something that I think that we need to kind of work through too, is that endpoint where everything's going to be better. But it's not. It's only going to be better if you take the steps. And that awareness,
because I think too, like, people wait their whole life to retire, and then they retire and they're like bored, they're unfulfilled. They're like, this is what I was waiting for. I mean, I think we can build up so much to that endpoint, and then we get there and it feels good for a little, but you still, you know, like I really relate to this too, because I for so long was like, if I could just be successful, if I could just, you know, I mean, I was like, writing a book, right, will change my life. It will be the epitome of being successful. It's amazing. And yes, writing a book and having it published was amazing, but it doesn't fix the pain of being human. It doesn't take away that the day that my book launched, like, you know, like my dog got sick and I had to like clean up my dog, you know, like, it's like, we're all going to have to do all of these things still that we don't want to do. Yes. Feel the emotions we don't want to feel. Nothing will ever take that away. Yes, absolutely. And that's what I want people to take away from this, is that, you know, you have to be aware, taking the steps, right? And this is like one thing that I love, and I want to make sure that everybody can understand, like, we're talking about sobriety and mental health, but this relates to everything. Like, you can take these lessons and put them into being a parent, put them into being a better, you know, whatever your hobby is, put them into being a better spouse or partner or son, daughter, all of it. Like, all of these steps can be applied to your life. And that's why I think, you know, this book that you wrote is so special. Like, it really is. It starts with sobriety, but it goes into so much more, and it goes into your emotions. And like I said, the way that you're able to break things down to make easier for people like me to understand, like, that's not something that is easily done, and you accomplished it in spades. And I just want to congratulate you on that. I really think this book is going to be a success, and it can benefit people who are thinking about getting sober, people who are sober now and so like just now starting sober, or 20 years sober. It can benefit everybody. So now that we're really winding down, people want to find you, Amanda. Where could they find you? So you can follow me on Instagram at Therapy for Women. My handle is not just for women. It's just the name of my practice. But everyone is welcome there. You can check out my book. It is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your local bookstore, anywhere books are sold. It's called Not Drinking Tonight, a guide to creating a sober life you love. And if you're interested in, I have like courses and other things I'm working on, you can visit my website, which is amandaewhite.com.
And we'll be putting that in the show notes so you can find it. Once again, that book is Not Drinking Tonight, A Guide to a Sober Life You Love. And that's the thing, is life you love. Let's highlight that. Like it is a lovely life. And, I want to thank you for coming on our little podcast here and having this wonderful conversation. I'm really excited to see what you do. I'm excited to see these courses. Go to amandaewhite.com and check out what she's got going on there. We are Untapped Keg. We are a sobriety and mental health podcast, part of the Believe Podcast Network. You can find us everywhere as Untapped Keg. We're lucky enough that that handle is available everywhere. Soon we will also have a website up. Find us as an audio podcast on all podcast platforms. See our videos on youtube.com/untappedkeg. I am really putting a focus and emphasis on our video content. Like, I'm learning how to edit. I'm learning how to make graphics. So going forward, I think the videos are going to be a lot more fun to watch. And, thank you everybody who joined us live. Like, we really appreciate it. And, let's try to be better tomorrow than we were yesterday, because at least if we don't make it, we tried. And have a good week, everybody. Thanks for joining us.